Let's be real for a second. Nobody wakes up hoping to get pulled over by a cop. But if you've been driving for any amount of time, chances are you've either been stopped or you've had that heart stopping moment when you see those flashing lights in your rearview mirror. So today, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know about how to actually reduce your chances of getting a speeding ticket when you get pulled over. Now, before we dive in, let me make something crystal clear. I'm not talking about how to evade the police, how to lie to officers, or how to break the law. What I'm talking about is understanding your rights, knowing how to interact with law enforcement professionally, and using legitimate strategies that can genuinely make a difference in whether you drive away with a ticket or just a warning. The first thing you need to understand is what's happening from the officer's perspective. When a cop pulls you over, they're making a series of decisions and assessments from the moment they turn on those lights. They're evaluating whether you're a threat, whether you're cooperative, and whether the situation warrants a ticket or just a warning. Everything you do from the moment you see those lights matters. So let's start with the pullover itself. The second you see those lights, put on your turn signal immediately. This shows the officer that you've acknowledged them and you're complying. Then, slow down gradually and find the safest place to pull over. If you're on a busy highway, it's actually better to continue driving slowly with your hazards on until you can find a wide shoulder or an exit. Officers appreciate this because it keeps them safer too. Once you've pulled over, turn off your engine. Roll down your window. If it's nighttime, turn on your interior light. Put both hands on the steering wheel where the officer can see them. Officers approach thousands of traffic stops, and some of those stops turn dangerous. Making them feel safe makes them more likely to be reasonable with you. While you're waiting for the officer to approach, don't be fumbling around in your glove box or reaching under your seat. The officer is watching you from their car, and sudden movements make them nervous. Just sit still with your hands visible until they come to your window. When the officer approaches and asks for your license and registration, tell them what you're about to do before you do it. Say something like, "Officer, my license is in my wallet in my back pocket, and my registration is in the glove box. Is it okay if I get them now?" This simple courtesy goes a long way. Now let's talk about what you should actually say when the officer asks if you know why they pulled you over. This is a critical moment. Some lawyers will tell you to never admit anything because it can be used against you in court, and they're technically right. But if you're trying to avoid getting a ticket in the first place, being overly defensive or lawyerly can backfire. The key is to be respectful and honest without necessarily incriminating yourself. If the officer asks if you know how fast you were going, you can say something like, "I'm not entirely sure, officer. I thought I was going with the flow of traffic." This is honest, it's not defensive, and it doesn't involve you saying, "Yes, I was going 15 over." Here's where a lot of people mess up. They get defensive or argumentative. They say things like, "Why aren't you out catching real criminals?" Or, "Everyone else was going faster than me." Let me tell you right now, this approach has never worked. If your goal is to not get a ticket, attitude is your enemy. Instead, be genuinely polite. Officers deal with hostile people all day long. When someone is actually courteous and respectful, it stands out. A simple "yes, sir" or "I understand, officer" can completely change the tone of the interaction. Now, should you apologize? This is tricky. Some people think apologizing is admitting guilt, but in many cases, a simple apology can humanize you. You might say something like, "I apologize if I was going too fast. I wasn't paying close enough attention." Notice the language there. You're not saying, "I was definitely speeding." You're expressing regret for the possibility and acknowledging a lapse in attention. Let's talk about excuses. We've all heard them. "I really have to go to the bathroom." "I'm late for work." Most of them don't work because officers have heard them 10,000 times. However, there are legitimate circumstances that might generate sympathy. If you're rushing to the hospital for a genuine emergency, or if there's a true crisis, you should absolutely explain that calmly and honestly. But don't manufacture fake emergencies. Officers can usually tell, and it will make things worse. One thing that can actually help is if you have a clean driving record. If you haven't had a ticket in years, it's worth mentioning. You might say something like, "Officer, I understand I made a mistake. I haven't had a ticket in over 5 years, and I really try to be a safe driver. This frames you as someone who made an unusual error rather than a habitual offender. Here's a strategy that not many people know about. Officers often run your information before they even approach your car. If everything comes back clean and current, they're starting the interaction with a more positive impression. Make sure your registration and insurance are up to date. Let's address the question of whether you should ask directly for a warning. If you've been respectful throughout the entire interaction and the officer seems receptive, a polite request at the end might be okay. But if you lead with it, or if you ask in an entitled way, it's going to backfire. What about asking the officer how fast they clocked you or asking to see the radar? This is your right in many jurisdictions. But if your goal is to avoid getting the ticket in the first place, pushing the officer for evidence at the scene can make you seem confrontational. It signals that you're preparing for a legal battle, which makes the officer more likely to just write the ticket and let the court sort it out. Sometimes the best strategy is to just accept that you're getting a ticket. If the officer has already started writing it, asking them to stop is probably not going to work. At that point, your best move is to remain polite, take the ticket, and explore your options afterward. Speaking of options, let's talk about what happens if you do get a ticket. Paying the fine is admitting guilt, and it puts points on your license, which can raise your insurance rates for years. In many cases, it's worth fighting the ticket, or at least negotiating it. Traffic attorneys do this every single day, and they know how to work with prosecutors to get violations reduced or dismissed. The cost of hiring an attorney is often less than the long-term cost of increased insurance premiums. If you decide to represent yourself in traffic court, preparation is key. Get a copy of the officer's notes, review the statute you allegedly violated, and look for any procedural errors. Officers sometimes make mistakes in how they document the violation or in the calibration of their equipment. If the officer doesn't show up to court, which happens more often than you think, the case is usually dismissed. Now, let's talk about prevention. Know the common spots where police set up speed traps in your area. It's usually the end of the month. It's often on downhill sections of highway where it's easy to speed without realizing it. It's in transition zones where the speed limit drops suddenly. If you know where officers commonly sit, you can be extra cautious in those areas. Let's also talk about the type of car you drive. Certain cars get pulled over more often. Bright red sports cars, cars with loud exhaust systems, cars with modifications. If you're driving a vehicle that stands out, you're more likely to get pulled over in the first place. Your bumper stickers matter too. Controversial political stickers or crude humor are a bad idea. On the flip side, some people swear by putting military stickers or police family stickers on their cars. The theory is that it creates a connection. Does it work? Sometimes, but it certainly doesn't hurt. At the end of the day, the absolute best way to avoid getting a speeding ticket is the most obvious one. Don't speed. Use cruise control on the highway. Pay attention to speed limit signs, especially in construction zones and school zones where penalties are doubled. Give yourself extra time to get places so you're not tempted to rush. But we're all human. We all make mistakes. So if you do get pulled over, remember everything we've talked about. Be respectful. Be cooperative. Don't argue. Show the officer that you're a reasonable person who made an error, not a reckless driver who deserves a ticket. And finally, remember that officers are people too. They have bad days, they have quotas to meet, they've been yelled at and threatened by hostile drivers. When you treat them with respect and dignity, you're not just increasing your chances of getting a warning, you're also making their difficult job a little bit easier. So the next time you see those flashing lights, take a deep breath, pull over safely, be polite, be honest, and hopefully you'll drive away with nothing more than a warning and a reminder to be more careful. Stay safe out there